Hello and welcome to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and
the history of TAG Heuer with none other than Nicholas Biebuyck.
I'm Felix Schultz.
And I'm Andy Green.
You're so excited, Andy. Why has Nicholas got you hyped up about the history of Heuer and TAG Heuer?
Because he is just a guy. What a guy. He's TAG Heuer's Heritage Director, but he's a very passionate watch collector. A lot of people know him from his work prior to being at TAG Heuer as their Heritage Director. And now that he's there, he's one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram.
Yeah?
Yeah, he posts stuff and you kind of go, man, are they letting him post this? Seems like he's just doing, he's got, a lot of free reign. And I'm talking about, he posted the plasma, that new plasma TAG Heuer. He posted that with like the cutouts for the manufactured diamonds and where they're going to go.
Uh-huh.
And you don't get to see that. Like you don't get to see like the machining of the case midway through. But Nick will show you.
Got a question for you. We're going to get into a chat. Before the chat with Nicholas, we're going to talk about the TAG Heuer Super Diver because they are this week's sponsors in a brilliant example of synergy. But I want to talk with you really quickly. Is that museum director / heritage director job for a watch collector, is that the dream?
It'd be a lot of pressure. You can't hide. You can't fake it. You really need to know your stuff.
And I think the risk would be that it might, you'd have to be really well-rounded in it because it could tarnish the love, like having to sort of be around it 100% every day, like seeing how the sausages are made and all that. It's easy to sort of...
Yeah, like I couldn't go be the heritage director of Gerard Perregaux.
For one, you'd
just be the Seahawk from the history.
You'd just be like, guys, we need to make more retro reeditions of the Seahawk.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that brand is never going to speak to us again, are they?
No.
No.
You really have to love the brand, and that's one thing Nicholas does is love the brand. Obviously, very into the vintage Heuer, so he's parlayed that into a pretty cool job with TAG Heuer. So
he's living the dream. We also talk about the Super Diver a bit because it's we had this chat around Watches of Wonders time, and it obviously was a very big star of the show, and it sort of ties into the brand's heritage in some surprising ways because TAG Heuer and dive watches might not be the first association you have, but this is a proper professional diver.
Yeah. Why is that, Felix?
Oh, okay. I'm doing it. All right. Well, I mean, 1,000 meters water resistance. Doesn't get much more serious than that. It's got a whole lot of serious features to it, but they're also quite technical because it's titanium as well. They haven't skimped and gone for the easy to machine steel option. They've thought about our wrists and the wrist muscles in particular, and gone for the lightweight, high strength titanium, which is also very good for dive watches because it's super corrosion resistant.
Very tough, very lightweight. One thing I really like about it is the aesthetic of this watch. Titanium has a coolness to it that, stainless steel is very polished, and you see titanium next to it, and it tends to be like a bit brushed, a bit matte, but it has a coolness and a sort of cool grey vibe. And you see that on the crown, but also on, 3/4 of the bezel. So it's really kind of toned down, but then you have this bright orange section and multicolored loom hands. And the dial kind of looks black, but I'm pretty sure with the sort of the texture pattern along it, it's more grey. And I feel that it kind of plays everything down, but those really strong kind of orange touches.
Yeah. Do you know what else I like about this? Speaking about the aesthetics, and you're 100% right. I mean, for me, I think titanium, I think technical. Like there's that sort of association. It's a air quote serious, watch material. I love that it's still holding into that Aqua Racer vibe.
Yeah.
Like it's got that, multifaceted bezel. It's got the sort of the same hands and
octagonal sort of design cue all through.
It's 12-sided, that bezel. One for each hour. I don't know what, a dodeco something?
Something like that.
Anyway, it's like a sort of an Aqua Racer on steroids. 45 millimeters, again, not for the faint of wrist, but I'm also fairly impressed by how it wears on the wrist.
Yeah, I can see you wearing this through summer. There's a bit of a flexy summer watch.
Yeah, and I mean, I've tried other like super big 1,000-meter divers on, and legitimately, I think this is the best I've worn in a long time.
What else is there to talk about? The packaging, obviously very fancy and impressive, really stepping it up to sort of meet where this watch is kind of priced in the market, which in Australian dollars is 9,650. Just
Yeah.
pretty damn competitive, I got to say. Keeping it under 10K with a titanium package, 1,000-meter water resistance.
Oh,
not bad.
One other thing, Andy, that isn't immediately apparent, and you won't really see it in the daylight press pics. They've color coordinated the loom. So, like the hour hand's different color, the minute hand's a different color. I think there's even a separate one for the seconds or another color on there, but it looks sick.
You know where they do show that off?
Where?
The TAG Heuer website, which, I've said before, it's one of my favorite websites to go. It's just one of the best designed websites out there, in my opinion.
Also, because you can look at the pictures of watch and they'll tell you the actual time. Incredible. Who knew?
Yeah, it adjusts to, whatever your computer's set at or whatever details you have there, but you can switch it to night mode. So I'm going to do that now. Let that load, see if you got that with the loom.
Oh, I didn't think about it because we were talking about something else, but the crown, wholly new crown, protected crown, so it's got a crown guard that goes around it. I want to see this on other watches.
Yes, yeah, just built-in crown guard, nothing to kind of pull out, nothing to pop out, nothing to
Slick
twist.
mechanism.
Oh, and the clasp.
Tell me about it, Andy.
Quick adjustment.
Love it.
Stunning work. Oh, and I've just remembered, I'm looking at these pictures now. The bezel does have like a brushed finish to it, which kind of resembles that of the titaniumness, of the titanium material. And the other thing, Felix, you mentioned the loom. So it's sort of like a Pelican case, comes with a UV torch.
So that loom is easy to check out.
Yeah, you can check it out and you can see how different it looks and how strong it is underwater when you're 999 meters below.
Yes, I mean, it will last far beyond your capabilities.
So you can head to tagheuer.com, type in Aquaracer Professional 1000 Super Diver. It's probably going to come up. You probably just type in Super Diver, it'll come up.
Sure.
You can grab it there. You can add it to cart. You can order it on the phone. You can even adjust the strap online so that it comes. Yeah, it comes with complimentary delivery and return.
Sick.
They take credit card, debit card, PayPal.
Or
Done.
you could do it the old-fashioned way and pop into your closest TAG Heuer boutique.
Melbourne, Sydney, we've got a couple of great ones here, or an authorised dealer. There's plenty of options, Felix. Yeah. And speaking of plenty of options, you've had a bit of time to catch up on a bit of Netflix.
That was a terrible segue, Andy. That was as bad as my terrible segue last week. I love it. Yeah, I've finally, a couple of months behind the hype, I finally caught up on Stranger Things.
I think you're a couple of weeks behind the hype, to be honest.
Well, actually, no. To be fair, I'm a couple of years behind the hype because I've only just started Series 4. I've just finished Series 3.
That's not too bad. I didn't get past Season 2, so...
Oh, right. Okay. So, yeah, I'm back into that, really enjoying it. Of course, the most exciting thing for me is the remarkable renaissance of Kate Bush, one of my, as you know, one of my favourite performers, who is now breaking a whole heap of records for having like the longest time between it took to get to number one, the oldest female number one artist. She's TikTok so much money off that song at this moment. She owns her masters as well, so it's all going to her.
So much money. I mean, it's TikTok, right? And sort of people were kind of getting a bit sad that kids were discovering Kate Bush through Stranger Things and through TikTok. And then
that's great.
You seen that meme about Tony Hawk Pro Skater of I can't talk. That's where I found all my music, and discovered the songs of yesteryear. So
yeah, true.
It is quite
legit though. I went to the airport the other day, so I got an Uber to the airport. I was in the airport, and then I was commuting to going on a day trip. I think I heard Running Up That Hill 4 times.
Yeah. Hey, good on you, Kate Bush. She's like an ambassador for some mining company with Julie Bishop and Hugh Jackman as well. Did you see that in the news?
What?
Yeah, she's back.
Mining company?
Yeah. Julie Bishop as well. Like they're all ambassadors for this massive mining conglomerate. So get that paycheck, Kate Bush.
I'm going to have to fact check that because that seems very out of character.
I'm serious. Yeah, Julie Bishop is the big surprise there.
I mean, Julie Bishop, she's got her fingers in lots of conglomerates. Anyway, Kate Bush aside, we had a chat last week about Tudor's new Ranger. And we talked about it on Discord, and that sort of conversation bubbled away all week. And it sort of boiled down to the Tudor Ranger is a boring watch.
Yep.
Is that good or is that bad?
Some people want a boring watch, Felix.
Yeah.
They want something that's unoffensive. It's not going to go out of style, and they're not going to age out of it, which is a bit of a concept I think more people are cautious of when they're spending a lot of money on a watch. Will this suit me when I'm 50 or 60 or when I'm 70?
Yep.
Is this, bright red Hublot Big Bang the watch I want to kind of carry through those decades.
I'm going to spend this sort of money once on a watch.
So for that category of purchase, or it's like, it's a gift, and a gift it's really easy to mess up a gift with like some. He likes red, he likes green, he likes.
Let's get him a Tutti Frutti Hublot Big Bang.
Yeah, which please, but you go with a safe option.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to go wrong.
Yeah, there's another word for boring is classic.
Exactly.
And there's a reason that the most popular dial colors for watches by a phenomenal margin are, black and silver white.
Exactly. It's like a white T-shirt. It's like the white T-shirt of watches. It's about the rest of the outfit, the strap you put it on.
Yeah. And I'm a very big fan. It's interesting. So I sort of looked at my own watches a little bit, and I don't sit in the middle. I'm either exceptionally boring or fairly wacky. So I've got bright pink, bright yellow, wild dials, or I've got super plain boring black, super plain boring silver, nothing and I think it's just like watches for different purposes. Sometimes I want to, go all out and I wear something yellow. Other times I just want to wear a watch that looks like a watch.
I mean, the dream is to just, be able to afford to just go all out and buy the wackiest shit that you just go, that's cool. I want to buy it. I'm going to get it. But I think the reality for a lot of people is, as much as they might want to do that, there's financial limitations there for us everyday folk. But
well, I mean, you as someone in the Discord pointed out, and I admit I did have a hearty chuckle about it, Andy. You're the king of boring watches with your love of Rolex.
I mean, I think most watch collectors love boring watches, Felix. I think that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to look at the gosh darn mirror. Speaking of Netflix, Felix, I've been watching Netflix too.
What have you been watching?
Big Timber Season 2. Got the notification from the Netflix app. Boom. You might enjoy Big Timber Season 2. You fucking bet I will enjoy this show. I'm going to binge watch it all weekend.
I've got 80 things to do on my to-do list, but I'm going to watch Jeff and the boys heaving logs.
Yeah, well, look, it was a bit of cliffhanger last season. I think it was filmed maybe like 2019. It was definitely before the pandemic kicked off. And so, obviously things change. There's shortages, timber shortages, as a lot of people that work in construction know about.
Sure. A lot of timber comes from Russia as well, I believe.
Yeah, all over. They're big on the maple over there. Not so much into the fir.
I like that you're talking at least like you now have a deep and profound knowledge of the timber industry.
I'm pretty into it. My TikTok has started giving me timber logging content, and I'm just like I went and liked every video on this one account, so they get fed more.
That's incredible. Do you get Thirst Trap Thor?
No.
Oh, you're missing out. He's
link it up for everyone.
He's a burly man that knows exactly what he's doing, and he just splits wood and says some of the most outrageous things while he does it.
Yeah. He just swears a lot.
No. He's like, oh, I did that in what? It's very
No. And he kind of has to take his shirt off at some point. Yep. We know who that's for. Me.
Yep.
So interesting show, kind of going from pre-pandemic to sort of nearly post-pandemic, and just sort of the struggles there. This season, we're caught with a bit of wild temperatures, so the snow kind of blocks him out of his selvage, and then the heat. So you obviously can't do too much heavy machinery work up there. But I just love it. Canadian shows. I love Canadians. I love Canada. I really love the heavy machinery element. This guy just buys like this 50-year-old archaic machinery and then just fixes it. It breaks down. He fixes it. He breaks down. He fixes it. Can't get parts. He just gets it done. This season is very heavily focused on like water salvaging, so trees that have been like logged or fallen and then have kind of gone down to like the beach.
Oh,
so they just cruise out with 2 boats and just like pull up on the shore, tie it up with a chain, and just try and yank it out.
Okay.
And yeah, I think he brought in a haul of like $250,000 from doing that. So there's some interesting ROI on the timber. He obviously has the mill, so it's a nice little family business.
Sure.
Yeah, it does well. He's a character. It's unexpected good content.
I have a question for you. You've professed your love of the great northern land of Canada. Who's your favourite Canadian OT guest?
Our favourite OT Canadian guest.
I can think of at least 2.
James Stacey. Who else?
Black Badger.
Is he Canadian? He's a bit of a global citizen.
Well, And I think he identifies as Canadian.
Oh, I'm not gonna choose now, so that's a trap that I am not going to fall into. But I did love. There's a bit of a difference between loggers and lumberjacks, Felix.
Okay.
Lumberjacks are the showboaty ones that go to those competitions and toss
Yeah.
axes. Loggers are the real deal. They're the real McCoy. The other thing, a lot
Mm.
of common phrases come from logging.
Can you give me a little quiz? Like you tell me a common phrase and I have to work out what it means in logging language.
Windfall gain.
Sorry, what was that?
Windfall.
Tree that fell down in the wind.
Yeah, but do you know why it's cool? Do you know why it's like the saying is like, oh, it's a windfall gain?
Because if it was on the ground, you like got it for free or something?
Yeah. So most parts of the world and like property laws and stuff, you can't climb up someone else's tree and take something. But if the tree falls down, they can just come up and take it. So if it's come down and the roots are out, they can come up and pull it out from the shore, from the government land without any worries.
Nice.
But if they have to cut it out, so if they have to like buck the stump,
Uh-huh.
and it's a completely different kettle of fish. So yeah, it used to be around like fruit. So if the tree fell down, all the fruit came, and then you didn't have to deal with kind of going up and getting the fruit. So there you go, Felix.
Well,
Waterlogged. Can you guess where waterlogged came from?
the log got wet.
Soaked in water. Yeah, and some wood takes water different to other wood. So there you go. Anyway, Felix, what else is happening? We ready to get Nick on or what?
Let's get Nick on in just a sec. But before that, you know how I was complaining about how my Artem strap is too glossy and too shiny for my Helios?
You were, yes.
It's still pretty glossy and shiny, but I've been going hard at it.
What does that mean?
I've been rubbing it up against trees. I've been crawling through the dirt. Yeah, I've been, photinering it to its best abilities. And it's still, sadly, is in spectacular condition.
Well, that just speaks to the quality of Artem Straps, artemstraps.com, artem.straps on Instagram, who've been supporting the podcast all year. So, Felix, that's a testament if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
Plenty of great sailcloth straps, amazing, a million different clasp options, and of course, their ever-growing NATO strap range. We wear them. We recommend them. We like them. Do yourself a favor. Get yourself an Artem strap from artemstraps.com.
All right, let's get Nicholas on. Today, we're speaking to Nicholas Biebuyck, TAG Heuer's Heritage Director. Nicholas, he's got lots of experience in vintage watches and is a trove of information when it comes to anything Heuer and older TAG Heuer. Now, Andy, not to spoil the topic that we're going to be covering off, let's dive in. First of all, Nick, before we get into the watches themselves, can you tell us a little bit about what the role of a Heritage Director is and how you get that job?
Sure, with pleasure. I must admit, it's nice hearing your dulcet tones in real life rather than just through the medium of podcasts. So quite the pleasure to be with you today.
Pleasure's all ours.
I mean, as you say, the Heritage Director role is a slightly mysterious one. I think many collectors and enthusiasts, as I did before I stepped onto the other side working for a brand, view it as someone who's locked in the archive, looking at dusty documents and kind of sorting through old watches. But actually, it has a much wider remit more often than not, and generally touches nearly all of the business, because you often have incoming requests from everything from the wider marketing team, between sponsorship and PR and events, all the way through to the legal team, the financial teams, looking at what the past represented for the company. Of course, the product team are always keen to look at the old models and see what inspiration there might be there. But it's a really wide thing, and it's not just covering the past, but it's a big look at the present, and of course, really considering what the future might hold. I'd like to think that the heritage side of the business really acts as a lighthouse in this kind of fog that is the current watch industry today, to try and help guide a company like Heuer and TAG Heuer in the right direction for the future.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. So talk me through what your typical day looks like. You wake up, you head to the archives, blow some dust off some old watches. Like what does a typical day look like for you, Nicholas?
I think it's probably on par with a lot of people who work in marketing departments at many multinationals. A lot of it is calls and emails, but the fun part is when I get to go to the factory, I'm often giving tours to collectors or partners or new employees. I might be looking through the archive to try and find a historic watch to send out to an exhibition or on tour, or having conversations like this, wide-reaching discussions with journalists or collectors, really considering where we are right now, where we're going in the future, and really reflecting on what Heuer and TAG Heuer has stood for in the past. So it's, as I say, I think a lot of it is similar kind of administrative stuff. The fun part is this side of things.
Now, something I've always wondered, and I suspect a lot of people on the enthusiast side wonder about, the role of the heritage expert is, what role do you have when it comes to, TAG Heuer producing a new heritage or revival watch? Are you actively involved? Are you there going, guys, we can't have a date window, we have to get rid of the date window? Or is it, a bit more hands-off?
It's a bit of both. As you know, TAG Heuer is quite a big company today. We produce a few more watches than we certainly did in the past. And the kind of key demographics have changed quite a bit. When you look at what Heuer stood for in the 1960s and 1970s and what TAG Heuer stood for in the 80s and 90s under, the ownership of Technique d'Avant-Garde, and then beyond into the 2000s, 2010s and 2020s under LVMH, we've got this huge, broad customer base that I think it's often easy to forget about, that there's a lot of people out there who want a chronograph Formula One in quartz with a date window, which might not appeal to the wider enthusiast base. And at the same time, when we do produce an enthusiast-focused watch, the quantities are often fairly limited because we don't want to oversupply the marketplace and burden it with it. So I am there kind of often sitting in the corner, or the fly on the wall, however you want to imagine it, giving some input from an enthusiast perspective, someone who loves fine watchmaking, who loves the history of the Swiss watch industry, and of course loves the brand that I'm with today, just to give some outside perspective. When we produce something like an anniversary for the Carrera, I think many of you will know it's the 60th anniversary next year. So obviously there's a few SKUs that I've been fairly involved with. But when it comes to something like the new releases that are coming out in Watches and Wonders, I can be there to assist in the storytelling and communication, but often the development cycles have been quite long. So the amount of influence I can have at that stage might be quite different. But going forward, let's see how many date windows we have at 4:30 and, the other great pain points for watch enthusiasts everywhere.
That's really interesting. I'm curious because if it was me stepping into this role in, the heritage department, the first thing I would do is make a beeline for the archives and just start poking around, looking for the most interesting, quirky facts about the brand that I could find. Did that happen with you? Did you go poking around? Did you find anything fascinating that you never knew about, TAG or, Heuer?
I've been very lucky that one of the first brands I started collecting when I was a teenager, or certainly got drawn towards, was vintage Heuer and of course TAG Heuer, because my other great love is historic motorsport cars and motorcycles. And of course, when you watch the racing from the 60s and 70s, you often see the drivers wearing their watches or the big Heuer shield on some of the cars. So I already was fairly familiar with the brand. And over the years, I've got to know the likes of, Jeff Steiner on the dash and the kind of collectors community at large. So I was very familiar with that era of things. Where it's been quite interesting for me is the TAG Heuer side, that I admit that it was an area that I was unfamiliar with because I hadn't chosen to educate myself with it, because I'd always viewed it as being, modern watches that were produced for a particular consumer that didn't necessarily reflect who I was. But as you look more closely, when you look at things like the rebirth of the Carrera in 1996, how that evolved into a product range in 2000, I posted the other day this solid gold Series 6000 with a green iridescent dial. What we did with the reissues of the Carreras in the 2000s and 2010s, the lineage of the Monaco, there's so many things to look at. And the really cool thing is when you have these watches side by side, you hold an original 1133B next to a contemporary Monaco, and you can see the lineage there. And you can also imagine what the future could hold for a watch such as that, given what's going on in the marketplace right now. So whilst there weren't necessarily any specific examples, I think when you see it all as a complete picture, it's a really, really fascinating, comprehensive history of a brand.
Yeah, that it is, and I think there's more and more appreciation for that sort of transitional era of into the 80s and 90s of TAG Heuer coming up now. Something you sort of just mentioned in passing there, that was that a Heuer, or I think it was a Heuer, not a TAG Heuer, was one of the first watches you sort of bought and collected. What was the model?
So it was a reference 2447S that I bid on at a small auction house in England back in the day. And that was kind of the beginning of the story. And of course, I've gone on to collect all sorts of things, Omega, Rolex, contemporary stuff from other big brands. but when it's your first love, you're always drawn back to it. And the 2447 still holds a very special place in my heart, particularly the Panda and the reverse Pandas, but it's gone on to include the 2446 Autavias, all sorts of Monacos along the way. That's the great thing about this company. It's been through so many different eras and it has so many icons. You can never really get bored of collecting it. And the great thing is today it's not being too unduly influenced from the speculative aspect that exists in the watch market right now. It's still kind of untouched territory. So you can still buy something great for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, which I think is a bit of a rarity today.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're clearly the right man for the job, sharing sort of the predisposed love for vintage Heuer and, the love for the automotive as well. What I'm interested is now that you're interested in now is that you kind of have this role, the importance that you sort of place on education and, kind of the pedigree of a brand like TAG and TAG Heuer, and what you wish kind of more people knew and sort of what your goal is with sort of educating, I guess, the masses.
Yeah, I think that's really the key point of it is that, as you can see, I have this great love for the brand and all I really want to do is share it. We have so many incredibly cool stories that whilst they're out there, through Jack's biography, through some writing that's been done in the past, they're not widely shared. And I love getting on to do these presentations, for 100+ people that we do from time to time in different markets and sharing all these weird and wonderful anecdotes from the past. And it's really that sharing and that sense of community, which is the value for us, particularly today. When you look at young consumers, they have the strongest nose for authenticity or anti-BS, as I call it, that you can't really play these games anymore. You can't make up these, fictional narratives around your brand being part of this story and this story and this story. Whereas Heuer and TAG Heuer, we have these stories in unlimited wealth, basically. When we talk about things, or Gus Picard, who worked on things like the Bath Escape Trieste, he used our timing equipment in his experiments. So we know that we were there during those incredible periods of him developing, these high altitude balloons and these sorts of things. And then when we look at the Apollo program, we were supplying the stopwatches to NASA. And that's how John Glenn ends up wearing one during Mercury 7, and how during Apollo 11, it's a Heuer stopwatch timing the fuel burn as the lunar module descends to the surface of the moon. So whilst we're not the celebrated wristwatch, let's say, we are there in a professional capacity. We are always there as this reliable, durable, sturdy, dependable timekeeping device that scientists, engineers, sports professionals have relied on for decades. And it's all of these kind of narratives that I think are extremely important to share.
That's a really lovely way of putting it. And I think one of the narratives that, TAG Heuer has sort of chosen to highlight this year is your sort of involvement in the world of professional dive watches. Clearly the Super Diver is one of the stars of Watches and Wonders, and the orange dialed 300 is another one. Now, some people might go, this is something completely new for TAG Heuer, but you've got quite some sort of precedent in that space, don't you?
Absolutely. So when we look back to the beginning, 1978, we have the reference 844, this watch that was born out of this need for a watch for recreational divers, particularly in the North American market. And we develop it and we're surprised by its success. And we see the dive watch space as an opportunity to explore further. So obviously we look towards saturation diving, occupational diving. And in 1982, we launched the 1000 meter with its crown at 4 o'clock. And at this point, the case design and the bracelet design and the dial design is, shall we say, generic. It looks quite familiar to some other brands because we're sourcing from the supply chain. But where really the cool part for me is 1983 when we launched the Super Professional. And this has always been seen as a bit of an ugly duckling among collectors, but for me, it's the one that blossoms into a swan, because when you understand its pure utility and how we ended up making those design decisions in period, you can see what makes it so cool. This massive monoblock of stainless steel so that it will make 1,000 meters without needing an escape valve. the matte finish, so you don't have to worry about these reflections in the dive habitat as you're stuck there for weeks on end whilst you're pressurized to your working depth. The big teeth on the bezel that became part of the Aquaracer DNA eventually, making it easy to turn with the glove on, loom everywhere, including the exterior of the bezel, and even these special black coated versions of the Super Professional that were made in the 1990s for these military, what were they, private security forces. So you can see the Super Professional is just an unbelievably cool thing. And it's wild that you can still buy this watch for a couple of $1,000s, because I just think it's the quintessential professional monoblock dive watch. So we have that. And then, of course, in the modern era, what we can look at is the Aquagraph. 2003, we launched the first chronograph that can be actuated underwater up to a depth of 500 meters. So there's so many parts of our story, and bearing in mind this spans nearly 40 years now, that it's a no-brainer for us to discuss it and obviously produce something for the contemporary age that reflects on all of this history.
What I find fascinating is, and I'd love to sort of get your take on it, is, Heuer at the time was a brand so associated with, chronographs and timing. How did you make that decision to get into the dive space in the first place with that reference 844?
Yeah, so this is a fantastic topic to explore because, as you say, everyone knows Heuer for chronographs, and the fact that we jumped into dive watches seems bizarre at the time. Now, looking back at it, you can understand what was going on between the Quartz crisis and what we call the Nixon shock. Both the cheap electronic watches that were coming into the marketplace and the challenges of fluctuating international currencies and huge volatility between the Swiss franc and the US dollar, the North American market being supremely important for us, meaning that we were losing money on some watches. We had to look for a new business discipline for us to survive, and not to use the phrase too many times, but as we say, don't crack under pressure. When you're pushed into these very difficult environments, you have to come up with very creative solutions. And that's how we end up looking at the dive watch space, because in the 1950s, you might be familiar with Jacques Cousteau and the Silent World, this book and this documentary that covered the world of underwater filming and photography. There was a huge appetite for recreational diving, for people to explore this space. And your options for a watch at that point were skin divers that kind of didn't last very long, or something like a Rolex Submariner that was, much more expensive. And we had, through our North American operation, a number of sporting goods suppliers asking us for a kind of middle ground, a reliable Swiss dive watch that didn't cost a huge amount of money. And this is how we end up producing the 844. And I always say watches are a great vehicle for education. And I certainly wouldn't understand socioeconomic policy in the 1970s without having looked at the dive watch space in the Quartz crisis and things like the Nixon shock. So it's amazing when you dig below the surface, not to use too many puns today, that you really start to see incredible opportunities to look at, learn new things.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you mentioned that you've been into vintage Heuer for a while. Vintage watch collecting in general has gone from strength to strength over the last few years. What's your kind of overview of the vintage Heuer / TAG Heuer market at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good topic to cover because the watch market right now is absolutely wild. I remember Richard Milles being difficult to sell at $20,000, and I walked in and bought a 5711 from a shop at below retail because they couldn't sell them. I remember being able to buy Daytonas out the window of shops back in the day. Yeah. And the market that we're living in right now is just bananas. I don't think there's any way to describe it. If you're a rational collector, it's a very strange time to be getting into watches or continuing your passion. The good thing is we're totally sheltered from this in the world of vintage Heuer and TAG Heuer in a sense. And of course, it might be perceived as a curse for some who were expecting their Rint Autavia to go from $3,000 to $100,000, but it's kept it fun. And it means that the collectors that I engage with, they're not asking me about their return on investment. They're asking me about the historic component, what it represents, where can I find one in great condition, how can I help to overhaul the pieces? The traditional questions that were asked before watches lived in safes and were actually worn. So the good news is we're in a fairly untainted market. Now, that's not to say that things won't change in the future. We did go through this period of 2017 when there was a big spike in prices, but as
it was crazy.
may have seen, there was a fall off because it was due to external players really trying to drive pricing, obviously without much success. And the good thing is it goes to show that you can't mess around with this supply-demand dynamic. And whilst that might mean for some watches, it means where demand is massively outstripping supply, whether it be a plastic chronograph or a steel fine complication. On the other side, when supply is much greater than demand, it means that prices have stayed quite flat, and it means you can still find a fantastic, strong condition vintage Heuer for a very reasonable amount of money, whether it's a Viceroy at $4,000 or a Rint at $15,000 or the perfect 1133 at $35,000, or if you want to go to the moon with vintage Heuer, you can buy a Skipper Era at $125,000 or a big sub Autavias. So we have this huge broad field to play in, and you have this great graduation that you can go from the very bottom of the price point all the way through to six figures, and just within one brand. It's super, super cool, if I do say so from a slightly
little biased there. But what I liked, I remember being in the UK for a pretty big auction. I think it was like 2018 through Philips, and there's a whole bunch of vintage Heuer timepieces. That's probably the first time I got to handle. It was a catalogue of like 100 watches. I think it was Gavin and Crosswade.
Yes.
And sort of looking through, seeing all of the different collaborations and models that I never really knew existed. Down to I think there was one that was done with like a Speedway. But what I hear from you is what your favorite vintage Heuer is and why.
I think it's very easy in collecting to get caught up with the granularity of things, whether it's an underline on the dial or the use of radium versus tritium, or whether the logo looks this particular way or that particular way.
Yeah, sure.
For me, I don't know if you've read some of my past writings on the topics, but I love that granularity in many ways, but I find that it's quite, it scares a lot of people away from the collecting discipline. And that actually, it's not really about that. When we look at these historic models from the 1960s, take the Autavia, for example, yes, we have a few executions and there's a few things to learn along the way, but fundamentally what we're looking at is this watch with this great connection to human history. We can see Mario Andretti wearing one, Jochen Rindt wearing one. Later we see Joseph, James Hunn, and then in the eras of culture, we see Stanley Kubrick and Sammy Davis Jr. wearing Monacos, Mick Jagger wearing Carrera. It's about this connection to human history. And I love any watch in great condition that shows that its honesty and what it was born as from the factory. But if you want specific references, I'm happy to indulge in that. So for me, the reference 2447 Carrera, whether it's a vanilla silver dial all the way through to the Panda dials, which are commanding quite a premium today, they're magical things. 36.5 millimeters, you put them on a gay Frere bracelet, and they wear so well. Similarly, the 2446 Autavia, whether it's an early big sub example at the six-figure price I mentioned, or it's a later Rindt, or even the compressor cases and the GMT compressor cases, incredible watches for the money. You can pick up a great compressor case GMT Autavia for probably $10,000 to $15,000. So I think when you benchmark it against what else is out there, it's a lot of watch for the money. Of course, the 1133 Monacos, but for me, it's the transitional dials with this blue iridescent finish and these rectangular hands that encapsulate the purity of the design that they were really trying to project, this sci-fi futurism vibe that was going on. Really magical things. And of course, the entry point watches, the 1153 Carrera, the 1163 Viceroy. I think you might know the story about the cigarette promotion from the 1970s, which is a funny part of the history. And then of these C-shaped case watches, for me, the king is the 1158 CHN Gold Carrera that was so loved by the drivers and kind of issued to them whilst they were racing. So you can see I've mentioned probably half a dozen references. There's many more that we can discuss, but I think we're quite pressed for time. But the point is there's no shortage of things to explore, and all at very accessible positions in the market. Yeah,
there's certainly a lot of variety, and that's what I noticed. And thank you for the very detailed answer. I think the one memorable piece that stuck out to me was the Dark Lord. I'm Monaco?
Yeah, the black Monaco, yeah.
I immediately saw that. I'm like, why does this not exist in the current time? So
yeah,
very
that is
cool.
a wild thing. And I did some really fun analysis when I joined, because we have this big problem of black Monacos. They're very easy to make up because the dials existed. It's a standard 7740 Valjoux caliber. And of course, the cases you can take from a standard steel Monaco and coat them. But the funny thing is that a lot of these guys who recoated them, of course, they've done it using modern manufacturing technology. So once you use something called a mass spectrometer, you basically have the fingerprint of the material underneath. And the moment you start seeing something like titanium in the watch, you're like, okay, this is a recoated example. So to find a truly all original black Monaco, they are seriously rare things. And I've been trying to pick up a few because it's something we're in quite short supply of in the archive. But there's maybe only a couple of hundred of them. And how many of them survive, it's quite tricky, but they're super cool watches.
That actually is a really nice lead into a question that I was wondering about. Are you and personally, or you're wearing your corporate TAG Heuer hat, how active are you in trying to acquire pieces of your own heritage?
From a personal perspective, before I joined the business, number one, I've collected vintage Heuer for a long time. I very rarely sell watches. So since I've joined, it's made the decision quite easy that I'll basically stop, because I don't want anyone to feel that I have any conflicting interests. But when it comes from the brand side of things, as enthusiasts, there's always this thing going around that, the brand's just pushing the prices because they want things to look good and this, that, and the other. Okay. And I totally understand that frustration. So this is a good chance for me to be very clear and transparent about things that obviously we have a vested interest in watches performing well. But what I would say is, from our side, we don't have unlimited budgets. So all I can do is support the price of a watch up to a point where I consider it acceptable for us to buy it as a brand. So I'm never going to aggressively chase stuff that we don't need to push pricing. And I can tell you right now, I bid on a lot of watches last year, maybe 30 to 40 pieces at auction. I bought in total a grand sum of 3 watches. Wow. So it goes to show that, yes, I'm there to support, but I'm not there to buy, money, no object. And often
pretty cool.
There's many guys above me who want to buy it. And this is a win-win for me.
Either way you win.
If I get the watch, it's great. If I don't get it, it means there's a really passionate enthusiast out there that wants to buy it. And the great thing is I always say when I'm telephone bidding, whether it's Phillips or Christie's or wherever, I say, please tell the guy that he just beat TAG Heuer at winning this watch. And I'd love to, buy him a drink if we get the chance to meet someday. So it's a great opportunity to kind of build community whilst, fostering the market and filling in gaps in the archive where we need to, or securing great examples of watches that we might use for the future. For example, I've been keen to lend watches to people, whether it's ambassadors or staff internally, because they're meant to be worn. There's no point in them being locked in a drawer until the end of time. They're designed to be worn. So why not do it?
Absolutely. Now, I'm aware that we're sort of running out of time, and I've got one question. I think Andy's got a question as well.
Yes.
As you're a listener of the old podcast, you'll know that we ask for recommendations. And now I want to ask you a bit of a targeted one, because you're in a spectacularly excellent position to answer this question. If someone's sort of just getting into, the world of vintage, Heuer and TAG Heuer collecting, it can be intimidating. It's a big brand with a lot of scope, as we've talked about. What would be your sort of tip, or like a resource, or somewhere that, people should head to learn more, or, do it the right way?
Sure. Well, the good news is I can overrun a little bit because I know we're a bit pressed for time, so we can.
Fantastic.
It's all on you, not us.
Yeah, it's not an important meeting really, so it's fine. So when we're talking about resources, for me, the go-to, which has been a long and loyal friend of mine in my collecting journey, is Jeff Stein's on the dash.com. It went through a redesign a few years ago. It's not the most complete thing if you're looking for in-depth storytelling or this, that, and the other, although he has some fantastic articles on there. But if you want to see every version of the Carrera or the Autavia or the Camaro or the Daytona that was produced, you can click through his site and find everything. And not to throw Jeff under the bus too quickly, but I know he's always happy to answer questions, as am I. So I know he gets a lot of incoming traffic with people asking things, but I'm always happy for people to reach out to me through Instagram or email to answer stuff. But so yeah, on the dash.com. And then on the other side, I guess you guys will have seen that the historic resource that a lot of people used was Caliber 11.
Yep.
The owner of that has decided to kind of mothball it. But the good news is that TAG Heuer bought the knowledge base, as it was called.
Amazing.
And we'll be integrating that into tagheuer.com. And I'm currently working through the process of reviewing some of the information and getting it more in the kind of tone of voice that we can use. So I think in the future, between On the Dash for the kind of more historic stuff, and particularly things like the catalog archives, which he hosts, that will be the one resource. And then in the future, tagheuer.com will have a dedicated section for historic models where we can give a complete history of the Jarama or the Montreal or the Monza in a very clear and succinct way for people to gain more information around the story of the watch.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm glad to hear that Caliber 11, sort of the knowledge base there is not, disappearing off into the ether, and it's being sort of put to work.
And don't forget the Wayback Machine. It's archived it very well. So.
True. We always forget about it.
Just hop on there. Okay, so I want to go back to the auction questions, just because I know you have to have an answer for this. You said that there's, you don't have an unlimited budget, but is there a watch that there's sort of that there's money's no object? That if it came up, you'd call up the directors and you'd throw everything you had at it. What's like the ultimate grail for you and the archives?
So for me, it's not, I think any collector gets to a point where it stops becoming about chasing a particular reference or a particular configuration, and it becomes about chasing condition, but then also provenance. And those are really the two key areas for me to explore now, is that if we see something coming up that's just in spectacular, untouched condition, then I'll absolutely go after it. But then on the other side, if I ever see anything with amazing provenance, if it was owned by a driver or someone who is very close friend of the brand, absolutely, I'm gonna go after it. Now, of course, as you know, I don't have an unlimited budget, but maybe sometimes you need to have a bat phone to top tier management to beg for some extra funds at the last minute.
This is awesome.
I think the door's open. We'll find out soon enough.
I love it. This is fascinating. Oh, that's my favorite takeaway. Is just the inner workings of your role. It sounds, you kind of underplayed it at the start, and then 30 minutes later, Felix and I both want your job. All right. Well, as Felix mentioned, you know the deal. We're going to ask you for a recommendation, something you've been listening to, reading, enjoying, that you think our listeners would enjoy. So hit us.
Sure. So for reading, actually, this is going to be a super off-piste one, but I've gone back to Machiavelli's The Prince, which is, if people haven't read it, it's truly one of the great writings, I think, ever. How good guys can be bad guys sometimes. So that's a great one. And then on the music side, I've been going back to kind of 60s and 70s soul quite a lot. So a lot of Marvin Gaye, but people close to me know that I have an undying love of hip hop. And I just saw Nigo's new album dropped a couple of days ago. So that's going to keep me warm and fuzzy during Watches and Wonders on the commute back and forth. So that's kind of my cultural sides.
Well, that's great. It's lovely to chat to you again, Nicholas. And thank you for spending the time with us and explaining just what a heritage director does. And of course, we'll link everything up. We'll link up Instagram and, point people to check out the latest TAG Heuer releases from Watches and Wonders.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Amazing. Thank you.
Huge pleasure and an honor to be on your illustrious podcast. So thank you for having me.
Honor's been ours.
Thanks.
What a guy, Felix. I feel like we need to kind of get Nicholas back on at least 3 or 4 more times to kind of really dissect the man.
So good. Just so knowledgeable and so free with his opinions about stuff. It's great.
If I had a massive watch conglomerate, I would hire Nicholas.
Yeah.
So just bear that in mind, Nicholas. If you're ever kind of looking for work and I happen to be in a position to hire you, I would hire you.
You're
a quality candidate. You're very impressive. Thank you, TAG Heuer, for, of course, our guest and supporting OT the podcast. I'm sure we'll be back very soon, probably next week, with more great TAG content. Thank you, Artem Straps. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you're leaving reviews. Make sure you're, telling people about us, tagging us, commenting. Discord, obviously, as you know, it's where we talk about boring versus non-boring watches.
We roast each other slowly.
With a bunch of different other watch adjacent and non-adjacent content also happening at the course of our Discord. We'll see you next week. Is there anything else, Felix?
No, I think you've said it all. ot.podcast on Instagram, ot the podcast, gmail.com. Let's go.